Sharon, what jobs are there with Tarsiers?
Not a lot. Most people that study tarsiers are either faculty at universities or um, they work in zoos, um, and they also work in conservation agencies.
Would there be any difference in the range countries of Tarsiers with jobs?
Um, I would say that the conservation jobs are more abundant in the range countries of tarsiers than anywhere else. So those particular jobs would be in range countries.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Sharon, what do you do, please?
So I'm a primatologist and a professor. I teach at Texas A&M University, and um, I do research in Indonesia during the semesters, studying the behavior, ecology, and conservation of tarsiers.
The next question always raises a smile, but do you do it for personal satisfaction, professional recognition, or the money?
Definitely not the money. There's very little. Tarsiers are so far from the human tree that most people really um, don't care as much about them as I do. I definitely do it for personal satisfaction. Um, eh, I have had some professional recognition, and, having a pat on the head is always lovely, but it's not the primary reason I do it. I would definitely say it's uh it's personal satisfaction. I
Fantastic.
enjoy what I do. I enjoy what I do. It's very rare that a person would get paid to go hiking in rainforests, and I am. I'm paid to go hike in rainforest and study these animals, and it's a wonderful job, and I've never regretted it. So I'm really very fortunate.
How did your career develop, please?
When I was in college, I was required to do an internship. I went to the internship office and they were able to find me an internship at the Duke University Primate Center, and it was a paid internship, which is even rarer. And so I jumped on it. So while I was at the Duke Primate Center, my responsibility was taking care of some of these animals, and one of them was a tarsier. And while I was there, one of the tarsiers, and I was 18, 19 years old, and I was hysterical that I did something wrong and I killed this poor animal. And the director of the primate center informed me that no, it was nothing that I had done. They'd been having trouble for years, and they had tried to build a breeding colony and were unsuccessful. And he told me that if it really matters to me, that I should go to Indonesia or the Philippines at the time. He told me the Philippines. He told me I should go to the Philippines and study tarsiers in their natural environment and figure out what the Duke Primate Center was doing wrong. And that's pretty much how I got started.
Sharon, what skills do field primatologists need?
The most important skill is the ability to adapt, because when you're in the field, nothing goes the way you're supposed to. I mean, just think of like conducting a transect, a straight line. Well, first of all, you can't walk a straight line in a rainforest. There are too many trees and other things in the way. You have to figure out a way to make a straight line and going around trees, and you need to be able to have tremendous observation skills. You need to learn how to see. Not everyone is equally skilled at that. Some people rely on their field assistants too much, and they never learn how to do things themselves. My field assistants, they always laugh at me. They tell me I don't need them in the forest to help observe the animals, because I can usually see the animal before they can. I can hear it before they can. The real problem is I get lost every time I'm in the forest and could never find my way back because I'm so laser focused on following my animal and observing them that I have no idea where I am. And that I haven't paid attention to all the external stuff.
When you first went out, Sharon, what were the big challenges you faced after being recommended to go out there by Duke Primate Center?
First of all, I was a woman. I was 20, 21 years old. I was traveling alone in a Muslim country. That was a big challenge. Women don't travel alone in Muslim countries. You travel with somebody. That was something I had to learn. My cook was like, "Oh, I'll go with you." And I'm like, "I can do this myself. I'm, very independent. I'm strong." And I had to learn how to do things their way. And I also had to learn the Indonesian language, which was very challenging. I still, to this day, don't speak beautiful Indonesian because I learned to speak Indonesian in the village adjacent to the national park. And the majority of the people in the village have maybe a maximum of a sixth grade education. So their Indonesian was very stunted as well. I don't speak formal Indonesian. I often say I speak village Indonesian, and because I was never trained and educated in a school.
How often do you get back out there into the field, Sharon?
I tried to go every year. I love Indonesia, and it's always a pleasure to go. And I have my own Indonesian family there. I always feel better if I go to Indonesia every year. Once I just see the forest, it's like the stress of the world just falls off my shoulders. I have one job only, and that's to watch my animals, observe my animals. And I don't have to worry about my kids. I don't have to cook dinner. I don't have to do all the things that I'm responsible for here in the United States. I don't have to do. My responsibilities are much more limited. So
Fantastic.
I
Right.
try to go as often as I can.
Do you take students and interns out, Sharon?
I no longer take undergraduate students, but I do take graduate students out to the field on a regular basis.
Mhm. What sort of briefing do you find that they need, or short courses before they go out? What preparation and skills do they need to develop fast?
Well, my students are anthropologists, so they understand about culture and they understand about cultural variation. So the things that they really need to be reminded about the most is to maintain some distance between yourself and your field assistants. So no sexual relationships between you and your guides, uh, no smoking in the forest, things along those lines. Things that should be relatively common sense, but sometimes they need reminders that, you may be a vegetarian, but when someone makes you a special meal, that you need to eat it, even if it is not within your dietary restrictions, because they spent a lot of time and effort and money on something that they don't eat regularly, and they're giving it to you. And so it's just little things like that that I need to remind them about. Um, but in general, and I remind them, while you need to haggle for prices, just remember, don't spend so much time haggling when figure out how much you're actually haggling over in dollars or pounds or whatever, so that, you don't want to spend an hour haggling over 2 cents. Think about what it actually amounts to. Sometimes you forget that you're so busy haggling over the cost, and you don't even think about what it actually amounts to.
What should the graduate students or interns or volunteers even that are joining your project, coming to your lab for an interview, what should they wear, Sharon?
Where to an interview in my office or in the field?
A little bit of both, actually, if appropriate, to your office, to your laboratory, and in the
It,
field.
to be honest, I don't really care very much what they wear. It's not, uh, I'm not concerned about fashion or whether you're dressed in a collared shirt or not. These things are not important to me. I want to know about your skills. So what you're wearing, you're wearing, you know, cut up blue jeans, it's really not going to matter to me. Um, I, I'm going to be able to look past that. So I'm not a very formal person, so it won't, I'm not expecting people to wear suits and ties. A very typical academic professor in the United States. I've been known to wear my shirts inside out and backwards because I just don't think. I have colleagues who wear the wrong, two different shoes. This type of stuff is rare, you know. Um, in terms of wearing the right stuff in the field, that I care about. I want to know, that you have a good pair of hiking boots that have been worn in, and a pair of khakis that'll, if they have tears or not in them, it doesn't matter. Uh, Long sleeve t-shirts because you want to minimize the number of bites you get in the forest, and things like that.
Sharon, what are good questions that people can ask at interview if they come to your laboratory or your office wanting to join your project?
I guess the biggest questions they should ask are about funding. So if they want to come and work with me at this university, they want to ask about, do you have funding for your students? How much? How long will it last? And that's usually 4 years, and I don't know, $20,000 stipend plus tuition. And they should ask about how often they'll be able to go to the field and how to get money to go to the field, questions along those lines.
To get into anthropology, field primatology, is a bachelor's degree sufficient, or do you really need a higher degree, a master's or even a PhD?
Honestly, you really need a PhD. You can do a master's and possibly even a bachelor's for some conservation type jobs, but anything in academia where you're going in the field and having hypothesis theory driven questions, that kind of stuff really will require a PhD. But a lot of the conservation work, you don't necessarily need it. You just need a true love of the animals, especially in the range countries.
Mhm. How can students in an interview convince you of their love and commitment for the subject animal?
By having a knowledge of the animal already that goes beyond just what's known on the internet, by really by knowing more than it than is that is obvious, that they've actually observed these animals, that they spend a lot of time studying them, that they're perhaps familiar with some of my work, that they're familiar with the work of others on tarsiers. That kind of stuff would really make a difference. That they've done their homework, that they've looked it up. There's a lot on the internet, a lot of good videos, but I want them to be able to identify, what's fake versus what's real on the internet, as this is, because there's so many places that it'll say things like the smallest monkey in the world, and tarsiers are, one, they're not a monkey, and two, they're not the smallest monkey, and three, they're not the smallest primate in the world either. And I want them to be able to know more, to be able to identify what's true and what's not, about these animals.
Moving on into a little bit of natural history, Sharon, and what questions regarding tarsier conservation would you like to see answered in the next 5 years?
One is, what habitat will still be left for tarsiers in the next 25 years? How is climate change affecting availability of habitat for the tarsiers? In Borneo, we know nothing about the real taxonomy of the Bornean tarsiers, the Kalimantan tarsiers, and I'd like to truly see some work being developed there. Most of the work on tarsiers right now has been restricted to both the Philippines and the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. And I'd like it to extend to Borneo, Kalimantan, and have an idea about how many species of tarsiers are on that island. If it's anything like Sulawesi, it's a lot more than the 1 or 2 species that we currently recognize that are there. And there's been almost no work being done there. And I'd like to see that change. Before you can do a lot of conservation work, you need to know how many you're dealing with. What's the normal amount of variation that's out there? And currently, we don't have any idea how much variation is out there.
Do we know how many species there are, Sharon? We don't. Wow.
No, because, right now, I would argue that we're probably going to find a lot more species in Borneo and in the Philippines than we currently acknowledge. Right now, we say there's 1 species in the Philippines. We say there are 12 species in Sulawesi. How can there be 12 species in Sulawesi and 1 in only Kalimantan and 1 in Borneo? I'm sorry, 1 in the Philippines and 1 in Borneo? That doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's a reflection of the amount of time and effort people have spent in those varying regions. And I think if more scientists spend more time studying the variation in both the Philippines and in Borneo, we will start to see an explosion. Only recently, within the last decade, tarsiers were changed into 3 different genera. So historically, it was all the ones in Borneo, Sulawesi, and the Philippines were all considered one genus, the genus Tarsius. Now we have the genus Tarsius, the genus Phallopacus, and the genus Carlito. So we're acknowledging that there's more variation at the genus level. Now we have to go and explore that variation at the species level, the trivial level.
Fascinating. Sharon, I'm assuming all species are considered endangered or critically endangered?
No. There are quite a few that are considered data deficient, meaning we don't have data to know what their conservation status is. And there is some that are considered vulnerable, and there are some that are considered endangered, some that are threatened. They have the whole spectrum. And so it's but the one thing I will say is every time they identify another species, they're cutting like in half the distribution and size of the original species. So it becomes more and more endangered the more species that are identified.
Fascinating. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Which kind of leads me on to the next question, which is where do our knowledge gaps lie in tarsier conservation biology, Sharon?
They're extensive. We currently don't know anything about how climate change is affecting them. We have limited knowledge about how they adapt to more urban type environments or agricultural environments. So we know tarsiers, the tarsiers that I've always studied and that most people are studied are in protected areas. But there's sometimes tarsiers in unprotected areas, such as someone's garden, okay, where they have palm trees or corn or whatever they're growing. And the question is, how do the tarsiers adapt to these environments? Can they adapt? Can they be successful? A lot of people are starting to use, in their agricultural fields, are starting to use pesticides, and tarsiers eat insects. And so how that is affecting the tarsiers in terms of a conservation gap, we don't know. We don't know how the tarsiers are affected by mining, which is very, very common in a lot of protected areas within Indonesia. There are a lot of mines. You know, no one's going to put the tarsiers above people, but you sometimes need to know how people are actually affecting the tarsiers. There's some people that opportunistically hunt the tarsiers, and we need to know how often that is really occurring. So there are a lot of gaps. We have basic population densities for a few species, but that's really about it.
Can you suggest a research topic?
I can. However, one of the things that I always like is for my graduate students to come up with their own research topics. I think that's a big part of the skill set. However, for the purpose of this interview, a, a research project could be what is the effect of gold mines on the foraging behavior of tarsiers? So are they more likely to hunt further away from the mine than closer to the mine? Where are they hunting? Are they more like, is their density higher in agricultural fields that don't use pesticides or do use pesticides? How are these different things affecting the tarsiers? Another example would be in terms of artificial light pollution, and how light is affecting their behavior. And I've done some preliminary work on that, and we have found that the tarsiers are foraging more. Okay, they're foraging more. Are they gaining weight? Are they becoming obese? Are they spending so much time foraging that they're overextended and they don't rest? These are additional questions that need to be addressed.
That's fascinating. I wish I'd have talked to you 30 years ago when I was starting out. Are there any books on tarsiers?
There are a few. There's a small book that I've written on the Spectral Tarsier. There are some edited volumes on tarsiers, which I've been part of. There's a book by Karsten Niemitz from 1984 on tarsiers, so 40 years ago. He's done a tremendous amount of work on tarsiers.
What's yours called?
The Spectral Tarsier.
And I have to admit, I have that. It's in the next room. And I love the fact that you've written a really species-specific book. That's terrific.
This is the one I am most proud of. It is called Tomas the Tarsier. And you can see some of the images and the drawings. This is a bilingual tarsier book, bilingual Indonesian and English.
Oh, wow.
That I hand out, throughout my travels.
Fantastic.
And so the drawings by Marion Coe are just phenomenal.
That's fantastic. Oh, I love that. Are there any conferences that students should be looking out for?
Conferences. So the American Society of Primatology, the International Primatological Society, to me, those are the two best societies for primatologists. I regularly go. Here in Texas, we have the Texas Association of Biological Anthropologists. We also have the Association of Biological Anthropologists. which the American Association of Biological Anthropologists, which is a national association, not just Texas. And these are great conferences that regularly have a lot of primatological presentations. My favorite is the international one. It's all primatologists all the time.
Fantastic. Is there a particular journal that students should be looking out for?
My favorite is Folia Primatologica. It is the oldest primate journal, and it's European, and I think it's phenomenal.
Fantastic. And Sharon, are there any breeding projects for tarsiers?
No. Back in the 1980s, Pat Wright and Elwyn Simons brought 20 tarsiers back from the Philippines and Indonesia. Of 10 were brought to the Duke Primate Center, 10 were brought to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., and neither agency ever developed a breeding program, despite that being their goal. They had a tremendous time. While they were able to successfully breed, the babies did not survive. And they just never got them going.
Oh, that's sad. That's sad.
The only place I know that has truly successfully had a first generation tarsier birth is a zoo somewhere in Japan.
Sharon, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think that's about it.
Sharon, you are a professor of anthropology at Texas A&M University. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal channel, Sharon Gursky.
Thank you. Bye-bye.